Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 352, and today's guests are Mark Ghermezian and Manisha Shah. Mark is the founder and general partner of MXV Capital, and he's also the CEO of two companies that have spun out of his firm, that being Tildei and Gynger. Mark has been an entrepreneur pretty much his whole entire life, and he shares lots of fun and interesting stories of these ventures and journeys, including the full story of Braze, a customer engagement platform that eventually went public in 2021. Manisha is a co-founder and chief revenue officer of Tildei, and in this interview, she shares her professional journey into the tech industry and ultimately running customer success at Rebel, which was acquired by Salesforce. Tildei is changing how companies and customers communicate. The company's AI-powered platform, which is initially focused on WhatsApp, enables brands to build deep relationships with customers through conversation at scale. The company has raised $6 million in funding, led by Sousa Ventures, with participation from Ludlow Ventures, Gradient Ventures, Lyra Hippo, Vine Ventures, MXV Capital, Marcelo Clore, Jason Lemkin, and other angel investors. In this episode of our podcast, we also cover the importance of persistence and grit when building a startup, how Mark and Manisha came together to build Tildei and how it all works, building and investing into companies from MXV, including the details on Gynger, Mark's contrarian point of view of PLG sales models and why he favors a traditional outbound sales operation, Manisha's biggest lessons learned as a co-founder, and so much more. Okay, quick side note. This week's episode is sponsored by MarketMuse, a content intelligence platform that sets the standard for content quality. Their AI-powered software enables companies to create predictably better content at scale that increases traffic and engagement, improves productivity, and drives revenue. Get more out of your content with packages starting at $0 a month. That is free. Plus, you can get 20% off the MarketMuse standard plan by using our code FIZZ20, that's FIZZ20 at checkout. Go to marketmuse.com to get started. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Mark and Manisha. Mark and Manisha, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
We're excited to talk to you. So I've probably done a handful of podcasts where I talk to both founders. So this is kind of unique. Because sometimes it can be difficult to get both stories, in one take, but we're going to do that today. So I'm excited to talk to you about what you're up to now. But before we get into the current company that you're building, I wanted to talk about entrepreneurship. And there's this mantra out there, especially, things have been a little bit tricky in the tech industry, but before that, with valuations and venture capital funding being, kind of not easy to come by, but easier. It gave this mantra that building a company, oh man, you just hopefully you have a great idea, a great team. In a couple of years, your valuation will be a unicorn. And it'll be so easy. And but I think people are learning that's not the case, especially in this economic environment. So, Mark, with the company you built, Braze, we're going to talk about the history of what ended up being built. But I want to talk about persistence and how it takes a long time to get there, oftentimes.
Yeah, I think it's all about persistence and grit. I always say you kind of create your own luck, and you do that with persistence and grit. I think the easy part is almost like raising the initial round of funding, because you're selling the dream. So you don't really have numbers or product, but you're selling your vision, you're selling yourself, selling your team, and so on. But once you close that round of financing, very rarely does it go the way that you anticipated, with your team, with the product, with your potential customers that you're trying to go after. Competitors, all of a sudden you're seeing a lot of competitors, and that always happens after you close a round. You're like, oh my gosh, look at this one, look at that one. Where the hell are all these people coming from? It was like literally whack-a-mole for us at Braze in the early days. And what happens is people that weren't competitors come into your space because everyone's chasing that shiny diamond in the rough, because they're also going through the same problems that you're doing. And I think that that's a very difficult thing to wrestle with as a founder, is not only just the persistence and the grit, but staying focused on your thesis and your idea and not chasing the diamond in the rough. I see that happen a lot, and it really kills companies. And all the companies that did that in the early days of Braze are not even around anymore, which I think is like really, really interesting. But it's so much persistence and grit because it's super hard. And even with the new company we're building now, we're like grinding away, and we're slowly unlocking what we think is the product and the ICP and the go-to-market play of what we're doing. But in no way, and very rarely, does anyone ever unlock it on their first hit.
Yeah, and but it is tricky because you want to stay the course, but then how do you know if you're on the wrong course and then you should hit the eject button and focus on a different path and not just continue to go down a path that is leading you to potentially nowhere?
Yeah, I can answer that a little bit more, but I think it's like listening to your customers a lot and potential customers. I think if people are saying like, this is great, let's talk in a couple months, then there's probably isn't something there. But if they're like, wow, this is awesome, can I pull in another team member? What's pricing look like? And if you're showing like value pretty quickly, time to value is important, especially in this market where budgets are getting tighter. And I think it's just being really honest with yourself too. So it's not about a pivot, it's about iterating more than anything. And I think that continuous iteration is super important. And if you're playing in a big enough market, you could figure out how to get your 1% of that market, which can equate to a very big company. But I think it's just being really honest and listening and keeping your ears close to the ground and kind of hearing what the feedback's like in the market about your product, about your vision, how your customers are potentially going to use the product, or if they're using it at all. I think there's a lot of things you need to pay attention to. But I always say at the end of the day, nobody ever appreciates your vision as a founder. So take feedback from other people with a grain of salt. A lot of people will tell you, oh, that's so stupid. Don't do that. Why are you wasting your time? But nobody, and literally nobody, knows the vision that you have and what you see. So again, you got to be a little more, not too cocky, but also like very confident in yourself, and press hard to really unlock your vision.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's rewind the clock and talk about each of your backgrounds. So, Manisha, talk about, growing up, what were you like as a child, just kind of those formative years.
Oh gosh. Okay. So I grew up in New Jersey, in an immigrant home. So my like sort of growing up, my dad had his own business so he came over, he worked actually in the garment industry, in New York City and on like 34th Street. And over time, he was like, I can do this, which is like very much his like his way of thinking. It's like I can do this, and so he eventually started his own factory out in New Jersey, which is where my family relocated to. It's where I ended up being born. But my brother was here.
What type of garments was he making or manufacturing?
Sweaters, yeah,
Sweaters.
yeah,
Okay.
manufactured
So,
sweaters for
so my dad ran a leather coat manufacturing, like his own business in New
really.
Hampshire. So we have that in common. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Did you ever go to like the dye mills? Like where,
Uh, I, yeah, he used to get the cowhide and get it. Like I never went, but I certainly would clean his factory of
yeah.
picking up all the leather scraps and, you know, vacuuming the sewing machines and all that. So I learned hard work ethic at a very young age.
Yeah, we had a similar upbringing then, because that was my first job. Is when I was like a teen, I was like 12 or 13 years old. My dad made us all go work in his factory, and so that was my very first job. I was like 12. My dad was like, he was nuts. He was like, we had a pool growing up in our backyard, and he was like, would wake me up. I was like 12 or 13. He's like, well, we're waking up at 5:30 in the morning. We're gonna do laps in the pool. He's not even like a very like like that's like not even his, but he was like, we're gonna do laps. We'd leave for the factory at 7, and I would spend all day with him. And my mom would always be like, make sure you feed her. And he wouldn't remember. I did enjoy it. I really love I loved watching my dad work. I thought it was like really interesting because it was like, it's very physical work, right? Like, working in a factory, it's very physical work. And but it's like also very like entrepreneurial. You really have to like you have to have a business mind. I mean, he was manufacturing sweaters by the end for like Bloomingdale's and Neiman Marcus, like, like Saks and big places. And so it's like it was a good business. And then of course, all manufacturing sort of left the country. So he ended up shutting it down. But I did that for years. And I was like on the factory floor, packing boxes and measuring. It was an interesting job. The other day, my niece was telling me, she was saying to my dad, she was like, Grandpa, I want to come work in your factory. Like, can I come to work with you? And he doesn't do this anymore. He's in real estate now. And he was like, yeah, sure. And we were like, why do you want to do this? She wants to earn money so she can buy tickets to go to Taylor Swift. My brother and I were like, you don't want to work with him. This is what it's like. And he's like, I would never do that to her. And I was like,
That's awesome.
It's your grandkid.
Your taught work ethic. I love it.
That was kind of how we grew up. Yeah.
All right. So what brought you to Syracuse?
I was really interested in journalism when I was in high school, and they have a really top-notch journalism program, the Newhouse School. So I got there, but very like I'm a pretty practical person. I come from a practical family, and so journalism is, it's not the easiest career, especially now. You see like the state of journalism. It's a pretty difficult place to build a good career. And so I ended up studying advertising. And then incidentally, I'm very interested in psychology. So I took a lot of psychology classes like throughout my time there, and ended up like a couple of credits away from a psychology class. So then a psychology degree as well. So I just ended up doing both of those together. And so I dual majored in advertising and psychology in the end, which is an interesting combination.
All right. How'd you get your career started?
After that, so I ended up, I graduated college right after 9/11 because I left school a little bit early. So I left school in December 2021. And coming back to New York City, it was like not the easiest time not to get into marketing or advertising really, right? Because a lot of those budgets got cut pretty severely. So I was just looking for a job, and I found a job, if you guys remember monster.com back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
I found a job on monster.com listing. And I applied for it. And that was at Nielsen. So Nielsen is like famous for the TV ratings, but they do a lot of CPG research. So I was an analyst at Nielsen for a couple of years, and I loved it. It was a pretty cool job. Like it's very hands-on. Like everything that you're working on is like in the store that you go and do your grocery shopping at. I worked on Nabisco Kraft Foods at the time.
Got it. Okay. And then you ended up in more of a customer success type of role throughout your career.
Yeah, that was always like, so even that role was customer facing. We sat on site with our customer at Nabisco, and I really enjoyed that. Like the thing that I loved about that job was like, I really felt like I learned a lot about their business. Like we were sitting on site with them. We really knew like the ins and outs of their marketing organization because that's who we were consulting with. And I knew I wanted to get more into technology because that's a pretty like, it's a database job essentially, right? It's like an analysis job. I knew I wanted to get into technology. Both my brothers are software engineers. It makes sense, right? So I ended up applying for a job at a company. It was called Cheetah Mail at the time. It's gone through a lot of iterations. But when I joined, we were for the years that I was there, we were the largest sender of email for brands in the world. So now it's, the Brazes and Salesforce marketing clouds of the world. But at the time it was Cheetah. So I joined on the American Express team, spent a lot of time there. And it's like, that's kind of where I really cut my teeth, so to speak, on customer success. It's like, there's nothing like working with marketers, especially retailers, to like really learn customer success. They are a demanding customer, and people have a very like high expectation of like kind of the service and the value that they're going to get out of email. I mean, this more than anyone. It's a pretty cutthroat type of industry to work in, email marketing. So that's where I started customer success. I love it. Like, I was doing it essentially in a different way at Nielsen. I love it. I love working with customers. I love like just getting into the brand and understanding, like thinking about how you strategically use the tech to like meet that brand's needs and understanding their needs. And so I've done that ever since, essentially, and until I got to Salesforce.
Yeah, and that was through an acquisition, right? With like
Yeah.
through Rebel.
Yeah, through the Rebel acquisition, we were acquired back in 2018, and we spent 4 years there. It was most of the Rebel team went over. We were a very small team. Our third co-founder is also from that same team, and we went over there. And I got absorbed into the product team there. I kind of had some choices, but the GM at the time is now the CEO of Amarsis, and she kind of guided me towards doing something on the product team. She's like, you can do product marketing. You already know how to do that. So try your hand at product and like get into that. And it was a really good experience because the Salesforce product marketing team is like, it's an amazing team. Like they really know what they're doing, and the product team really partners with them. There's not like a really specific like go-to-market function on that product team. And so that I kind of ended up operating on that for our product that we launched. We integrated we did interactive email. So if you ever get an email from the Home Depot, if you ever buy something from the Home Depot and you get an email, they ask you to review a product, that's Rebel. It's now Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So we integrated that product into the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And that's the product that I helped launch.
Oh, that happened to me yesterday. I was at Home Depot and I did get that email. So
Yeah.
real time.
I hope it
All
was a
right.
great experience.
Yeah, and you worked your way to a VP role and obviously now, building a company. So before we get into what you're up to now, Mark, let's talk about your background. So
Oh.
you obviously entrepreneurship was something that was real to you because you started a company while in college.
Yeah, yeah. I even started a company when I was 13. I got vending machines and bought vending machines with my bar mitzvah money and put them in places and got to 5 machines. Um, and then in high school, I started a restroom advertising company, putting ads on top of urinals and bathrooms and selling those spaces. And then
So how did you go and get customers for that? Like in high school, I can't imagine myself being out there like,
but so I actually just there was a company called Health Club Panel Network in LA that I gave them all my inventory to sell. And I took 20%. They took the 30% went to the venue, and they took the other 40%. So I really didn't do anything. I was one person team myself. I signed stadiums, health clubs, and then I would give the contract to my competitor to sell it on my behalf. So I did that for like 4 years, and then sold the company, and
sold the company?
then we sold. Yeah,
Who did
no,
you sell it to?
to Health Club Panel Network.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then I started a company in college, which was what you were referring to, the MVNO.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I had to look up the acronym. I'm like, what is an MVNO? So mobile virtual network operator. So you were
yeah,
buying minutes and getting distribution deals.
yeah. So that's what Virgin Mobile is. They don't own a network; they're riding on top of Sprint's network,
Okay.
and then they just rebrand the whole service Virgin Mobile. So I did the same thing with Singular at the time, which is now AT&T. That was a more difficult business because we were subsidizing handsets. It was prepaid. Um, we distributed through about 1,200 stores across the country. And at that time, it was me, Virgin Mobile, Disney launched their own phone. I don't know if you remember, ESPN had a phone.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that.
Those flip phones, ESPN, and there was another startup called Amped Mobile, which is creating like cool content. I actually have a theory that like that's all those concepts turned into apps. So like that's kind of what got me into Braze and started making me think about Braze is like this Disney mobile phone and the ESPN mobile phone with exclusive content. They just took that and made it into an app on the iPhone. But it was all a journey. Like I just love starting things, and I'm a problem solver. So if I see an opportunity, I don't really think twice about it. I just kind of dive in. And then going back to the persistence and grit, I just love it. I just love pressing forward, and and seeing what we can do and see how things turn out. And I'm a big fan of just surrounding myself with like really great people that I can learn from and lean on with, help me scale with the visions I have and so on. And that's what kind of got me into Braze. I just had this idea. The original idea was like, I'm just going to make this website. A lot of people don't know the backstory, but it was originally called Appboy. And we were just making a website where I wanted to connect people that were building apps, so the developers with the users. And the way I was doing it originally was almost like a social network-esque website that I was building. And then I quickly realized it doesn't make sense for it to be a website when it's mobile apps. And then I started learning about SDKs and software, and there was a company called Flurry, and then there was Foursquare with checking into bars. I'm like, okay, what if we made an SDK that you check into an app, and then you know who the user is, and then the developers can interact with the customers, and then everything kind of just like morphed slowly. It goes back to what we were talking about before. It's just like you have this idea in a big market, you just got to keep your ears close to the ground, and eventually we just landed on this concept of lifecycle marketing CRM for mobile apps, which then included push and email, in-app messaging. We were already tracking a lot of data. We had an SDK, just a little tweaks here and there, and then that's kind of what put the whole Braze company and product and idea together. But it was two to almost 3 years of continuous iteration by myself with some consultants. And then I raised my seed round in June of 2011. And then I met my co-founders. Didn't spend a dime until I found my co-founders, Bill and John. Bill is now the CEO, and he took it to the IPO. But it was an awesome kind of experience and journey. But again, it doesn't happen overnight. It was like from 2009. I think the IPO was in 2021. So
I mean, the lesson learned here is 3 years of listening to customers, iterating, figuring out market fit, not just throwing something out there and hoping that this is going to be the company.
And I think that's true with everyone. We didn't get into it too much, but obviously I'm investing through my fund, and I have a fund now, and so many of the founders I talk to, it's like you need to just keep iterating on the product and talking to your customers, and it doesn't happen overnight. And I think a lot of reasons why startups fail is because they run out of time, and they didn't raise enough capital, and they just burn. And are they just not? Obviously, there's a lot of different reasons, but I think at the end of the day, you didn't have enough time to figure out your product market fit and your ICP. And there's all the things that come below the surface of how you do that and the best practices of doing such. But I think if you're smart and you're in a big enough market, you could figure it out. But yeah, that's kind of like the whole story from like bar mitzvah age 13 now.
But did you have like a developer team? Like, how did you build the product like without raising capital? Or
So I was originally just consulting it out to a few people. And then when my co-founders came on, they looked at it, scraped everything, and we just built it from the bottom up again.
and what was it like raising capital then in New York City?
Oh, so I was actually living in Houston at that time. And I went to South by, and I just kind of just met whoever I could to get a meeting with. And then I continued the meetings to SF. And it was hard. Like we weren't getting anyone to commit till one person came in, and then the FOMO effect kicked in, and people started coming in, and we just raised $1 million on a 4 million post. So an expensive round, but I would do it again. I think it's just like you just want to get the money in the door, and so you can start building. But yeah, I think it was difficult, and it was difficult to raise our bridge that we did in 2012, and then it was super difficult to do our A. Literally had 2 weeks of payroll left, and
Stressful.
yeah, and like 20 people at that time. So, but we still got it done. And then the Series B was a little easier. Series C was tough. And then Series D, and around that time is when I was transitioning out, and Bill came in, and co-founders, and then it kind of like started getting. I can't say it was easier because it's never easier, but raising is always hard.
Yeah. All right. So let's bring everyone up to speed on what you're up to now.
Yeah, so I'll jump right into it, but around Braze's IPO is when I started thinking about what I wanted to do next. And I landed on the idea of starting a fund, um, and focus on like early stage B2B SaaS. And then I love starting stuff, going back to just since I was a kid, I just like love starting ideas. So we incubated. I had this idea about like what the next gen of lifecycle marketing was. I'm like, and looking at customer behavior, we're all interacting on Instagram, DMs, WhatsApp, SMS, texting, just texting in general, conversations. And it's less about triggered notifications via push and email. And I just had this vision of like, how do we build the next conversational based platform? And I was putting feelers out there on LinkedIn, asking people if they know people that would be interested in talking about this, and really for the purpose of just learning. And that's kind of how I connected with Manisha and our other co-founder, Kevin. And we formed this company called Tildei, and it's focused on building the next lifecycle marketing platform, which we call conversational marketing.
Manisha, how did you get involved with the company?
So Mark I think you posted something on LinkedIn, and the founder of the company that I was with Rebel, that had gotten acquired into Salesforce, he saw it and then connected. I want to say he connected Kevin, our other co-founder, with Mark, and then Kevin and I had already been talking. Like, it was our 4th year of being at Salesforce. We were almost done with our vesting period, and we had been talking all year of like, what's next for us? What are we going to do? And so when they connected, he was like, all right, let's all get on the phone. And yeah, that's how we connected.
Well, let's talk about like the use case, right? So you're building this on WhatsApp initially, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does it work?
So, I mean, so the reason we started with WhatsApp is because, as Mark kind of talked about, like, we have this vision around this conversations, right? Customer conversations, people being able to both initiate and like have a conversation initiated with them. And WhatsApp is, I mean, it's the largest chat app in the whole world, right? There's so many people on it, including in the United States. There's 100 million people that just reached that milestone. There's about 3 billion people on it globally. Yeah. So it's a massive, massive audience. And there's not really anyone that's marketing, that's using it, there are companies, there's individual companies that are using it to market to customers, right? And in a lot of the world, that is literally where business gets done, right? You can kind of ask people all over the world, they're like, that's where we do all of our business. But there's not necessarily a platform that is enabling that at some large scale. And so we saw an opportunity there for those conversations to happen there. And then another nice thing about WhatsApp is they had just opened up their API, their business API, and it enables a lot of that from a technical perspective, right? Like having the quick replies, having the literal technology to have the conversation back and forth and to enable it in a really easy way.
So that API for businesses was not available. Like that's a recent thing.
It's a pretty recent thing in the last couple of years. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's a massive opportunity if that's not, like I think about when Facebook originally opened up and started advertising, right? And just you think of fast forward how many years and how massive that is.
Yeah.
That to be opened up by WhatsApp and have that scale of billions of users. And it's only growing in the US. I mean, I never heard of it. And I'm like, I do not want another messaging app. No, I can't. But I keep hearing more and more people, oh, we just have a WhatsApp chat. And I'm like, okay, it's only a matter of time.
It's only a matter of time.
And I think for us, it's like finding that first channel that we can build on top of, but with a broader vision of supporting multi-channel where conversations are taking place. Because I think you have different conversations for different purposes now in different platforms. And brands, I think are going to have a hard time scaling and doing this on a personalized level, one-to-one level at scale. And conversations are hard to build. I think with emails, it's very rudimentary in some ways. Like you design the email, and this is your onboarding email. This is your monthly newsletter, and but a conversation, like we all got on this podcast right now, and we have no idea. It's not like we have a script that we're reading off of and thinking about what you say and what I say, but it's a true, authentic conversation that you can't really plan against. So it's a hard problem to solve when you start thinking about doing it at a global scale. For a brand to talk to their customer, even 1 to 1,000, 1 to 100,000, 1 to a million, 10 million, 100 million, having conversations and understanding the customer needs, and also hearing, like, understand the brand's values, the brand's voice. Like, there's so many things that you're building around it. So it's a really interesting problem to solve, but one that where we believe is like the future of lifecycle marketing, and how brands are going to start communicating with their customers.
And it's first party data too. So as a consumer, I'm opting in to this brand to have
Absolutely.
access to my WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that it's just like you, in some ways, as a customer, you almost want that, right? It's you have questions, you order something, you'd rather just, like, on your terms, you just kind of reach out, they get back to you, you can mark it as unread, reply when you want. It just makes it a lot easier than trying to find it in email. Did it go to spam? Where's that email that they sent me? It allows, like, the customer to put the guardrails around it a lot in a more intimate feeling than I think just traditional email, and maybe in some cases SMS.
Yeah.
Well, and obviously the advancement of what we've seen with AI and large language models and what has happened over
The
the past.
timing couldn't have been any better, right? And again, that's where I think, like, continuous iteration, grit, persistence, and you kind of create your own luck comes into play. Is like we're pushing against this, and I think when you see the new models coming out with ChatGPT and all these things, like it can almost, like, 100x what we were thinking about doing 2 years ago, which is super, super exciting. But with that also comes competition, right? So it in some cases also lowers the barrier of entry around what we're building. So we're taking a step back in terms of, like, how do we actually build this into a true platform for the marketer, where it's not just like a chat bot or anything like that.
Yeah, because, like, how do you build this? And then I'm sure your former company Braze is thinking about this, and Klaviyo and Salesforce, and so is it that you're the upstart, that they're too large now and eventually they'll have to figure it out, or like how do you think about competition?
I think it's like in our DNA, right? Like, we're building with the conversation first and primary. And these other platforms, they are really good at sending messages at scale, but one-way messages. And it's a really different paradigm, like kind of what Mark was saying, right? Like, a conversation is complex, and you have to be able to react in the moment contextually with the understanding of, like, what's happening within that conversation, what's important to the other person, what are they asking for, what are they interested in, and what's, like, if you're speaking on behalf of a brand, like, what can I say on behalf of a brand? Like, what do I understand about the brand's values, the brand's products, what do they offer, et cetera, right? So you have to be able to answer that. It's a complex thing to do. So I don't know, like, I think we're building with that as, like, that's the core thing that we're building with, where we're not starting with, like, we're just sending a lot of messages at scale and being really good at that, which they are really good at that, but this is a really different paradigm.
I think the best analogy is, you think of electric cars, and Tesla built an electric car from the ground up. They didn't just take they weren't like GM, where they just took an existing car, ripped out the engine, and put in a battery, right? It just doesn't work like that. And I think I went through that experience at Braze, building a mobile first lifecycle marketing platform when you're competing against ExactTarget / Salesforce Marketing Cloud, where they're really built for cookies and desktop and email triggers. When you're dealing with mobile, you're dealing with so many different types of OSs, so many different types of handsets. Customers are literally taking this in their pocket. They could be in one geo today and a different geo tomorrow. You have different languages. Like it's a totally different animal to deal with. And I think the DNA, what Manisha was saying earlier, is like building this from the ground up, focus on conversation first, is very different than just like adding in a channel as an incumbent or an additional channel and so on. So I think DNA is super important, and why startups can be disruptive in a mature market.
So what's the current like state of the company, like funding or anything you can talk about?
Yeah, so we closed a $6 million seed round, and we've just been really focused on building the product right now. We have design partners, and we're hoping to announce the seed round in the coming weeks, and kind of correlating it with the launch of this podcast as well, which we're super excited about. And we're still a super small team, sub 10 people, and just kind of keeping our heads down. A lot of product development right now. And we're also we're thinking about how do we utilize AI, and how do we think about the future role between us and the marketer? How do we think about the future role between us and marketing agencies? How do we think about like us and the customer? And there's a lot of thought and to me, I think it's like a very intimidating market. A lot of tools, a lot of things that marketers are using. So how do we really simplify what we're building to make it really easy for any marketer, not just a rock star marketer, to utilize a platform like Tildei that can turn them into a rock star? So like that's kind of how we think about what we're doing, and still figuring out a lot of like the things that come with that.
And like how has the reception been for the brands? Like, is it like, oh, this is logical next step for where we need to be? Or has it been like, I don't, trying to grasp the market? Like, how's the education in the early adopter phase been?
Go ahead.
I think it's interesting, right? Because this is a different way of thinking. This is a different like way of approaching marketing, from being sort of like push to having that conversation. But it's happening. It's happening whether you kind of want it or not, right? So people are going into Instagram and messaging brands, and wherever it is, Messenger, Instagram, etc. People going into chatbots, even like support chatbots, and asking those types of questions. So I think it's sort of like an inevitable thing that people have to, that marketers are understanding is happening. From our early customers, the reception's been really good, right? It makes sense, and it's very powerful. Like we've published a couple of case studies. The results are really, really strong. People want to be able to ask questions to brands, and a lot of what we're doing is sort of like these guided sales processes. So you're coming into a brand, you want to understand like how do I make a purchase, right? If you think about like buying things today, I think it's kind of changed, right? Like there's just millions of reviews out there. There's so much information. You can Google to death, like to research how to buy a product. And I think people are getting fatigued by that. I know I'm getting fatigued by that, right?
Oh, and so you were talking, I'm like reviews. I'm like, you can't trust any of those
And you
things.
can't, right? Because like I was buying like for Labor Day sales, I was buying some like shoes online, and like half the reviews are like the ones where they get free product and things like that, right? Like they're like initiated reviews and things like that. It's not easy to make those types of purchases. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of like what's happening in the influencer marketing world, where people are telling you like, I have this thing and I really like it. And I don't know if you've spent any time on TikTok, like you can tell what's pretty authentic, versus what's, less authentic in terms of like, I actually use this versus I don't. And I think that world is very interesting to me. Have you ever heard of the JAM study that was done in, I think up at Columbia, where there was a researcher and she went into a store, and they set up like sort of two different tables, two different experiments. And one was set up like 36 types of jams, and people could sample them and try whatever they want and buy whatever they wanted. And then they did another one where it was just three. I think it was three, or so it was some smaller number of jams. And the one that won out, like that sold more, was the one with fewer options. And it kind of makes sense. Like, I think we get a lot of decision fatigue. So like, I think about Double, one of our customers, and like why this is successful for them. It's very successful for them. They've had like 320% increase in sales, right? And I think it's because they're just showing, like, people are coming in, they're asking a bunch of questions. What do you need? Like, what are you looking for? They're a rug company. And then they're like, this is what you should buy. And they're just telling them, like, here's a couple of options, but this is what you want. And I think that's a really good experience. I think of it as like when I go into a store and you have a really great sales experience, like that should be something that we can replicate online. It doesn't have to be just hours of looking at millions of tabs of products and trying to differentiate, very similar things. Like someone knows the information about the product and they can ask you some questions and tell you what you should get.
Well, and if it's a one-to-one relationship with your consumer, like the example you have on your website of, hey, here's an offer,
Yeah.
can we help you find anything? I'm looking for women's running shoes. Oh, well, just like all of a sudden they learn, I tend to like, running shoes from New Balance and that have, a lot of cushion and I like, these colors. It's just like they're just gonna like, hey, you tend to run and you probably buy sneakers once a year and just so happens right before running, summer season, I get that discount and they know, here are the three new styles and I'm just gonna click one and be like, I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah. And
Like
we
a
talked about like
salesman back in the
third
day.
party data, first party, zero party data, like what there's not, I don't think there's anything more valuable than that, like this, what we're calling conversational data, right? Like what people will tell you naturally in a conversation it's a lot. It's a very
But
valuable.
what
Exactly.
changes these LLMs make it actually conversational versus a text that you're like, that's annoying. Stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the real power.
Now what is the plan? You said the team's pretty lean, but are you planning on like adding some members to the team over the stretch or?
We're pretty heavy on product engineering today. So we'll probably start to hire a little more on go-to-market. But we're still working very closely with our design partners. We're starting to come out to outside of our design partners and identifying our ICP and who the customers are that we want to work with. So I think we'll start hiring around like BDRs, AEs, product marketing, and those specific roles. But I think we can do a lot with a lean team, and we're super excited.
Well, I wanted to talk more about, MXV Capital too, your investment and company creation arm. But I want to talk about Tildei first. Now I want to kind of rewind and so, you're starting multiple companies. So how are you, thinking about building companies, investing in companies, like that whole MXV Capital experience?
Yeah, I think it's almost one of the same because I'm investing super early, like pre-seed and seed. I think building together with the companies that we're investing in has allowed us to be super real with what they're going through building. In so many cases, we're sharing resources or ideas and thoughts between the teams that we have here, building the companies that we incubated, as well as with the teams of the companies we invested in. And it's been really awesome to kind of see how they kind of work together. I don't think I could do it if we weren't in person. So we're pretty in-person culture for all the folks in New York, Monday through Thursday. Couldn't do it without my co-founders, and I have a great chief of staff that helps me scale as well, and so on. But I don't know, I just love doing this. It doesn't feel like I'm doing three different things. I feel like it's like one big company with different departments. And that's kind of how I try to operate with everything I'm doing. But the focus is the same. It's like early stage building. And building value and just building really awesome products and surrounding myself with really incredible people that kind of share those values.
Well, another company that has traction is Gynger.
Yeah. That was the first company we incubated. And that's growing now. That's almost 30 people. Recently we closed our Series A with PayPal Ventures, a $20 million Series A. We also closed a $100 million facility. Again, a completely different idea market, but it came off of the heels of me building Braze and selling SaaS, and it was just like payment terms of SaaS, and there's no concept of flexible payment options. And I was like, wow, what if we could build this platform that really introduces the concept of flexible payment options for your entire tech spend, from your cloud to Slack to Braze and so on. And that's really what we're building there. So that's kind of taking on a life of its own. But it's been super fun to kind of see how a fintech company that's catering to SaaS and technology, how that's built, getting our product market fit, and going through all the iterations and the things that we had to do to unlock the go to market there.
Now, along those lines of go to market, so I'm going to steal this from another podcast because I thought it was super interesting, and it was out there on LinkedIn a bunch. But so you're a contrarian, from what I gathered, of like a PLG business model, right? Like, how do you think about sales, and what's an effective sales strategy for companies? Because I think
Yeah.
it's like PLG is like the holy grail. Like, oh, what? Why hire a whole sales team if I can do a PLG?
I think a lot of founders think they're trying to force PLG on products that aren't, or platforms that aren't. I think there's nothing wrong with true SaaS pricing. And especially if you're selling enterprise, I think nothing beats BDRs. I think if you can really build that muscle of outbound emails and sequences of calls and emails, and identify your ICP, account-based marketing and sales, and really build that engine internally, you can really control your destiny. So you're not dependent on anything else. And I think that's something that we did really well at Braze. We just invested so much time and effort into our BDRs. Like, it was a completely outbound business. And we didn't focus on like what investor can introduce us to somebody. Like, we just didn't know anybody, and we just like went out there. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of founders today make mistakes of trying to outsource it. I'm really curious what all these AI models for BDRs, what they do. I think it's just going to be boiling the ocean. It's just another form of an agency in my mind. But nothing really beats, I think, true BDRs that are doing the sequences, identifying the ICPs, qualifying them, reaching out, and getting really good to really connect with the person that they're potentially trying to sell to.
Yeah, and I'm biased, but I have a similar point of view with AI as it relates to hiring and recruiting, talent acquisition. There's a there is a use case for it, and I'm sure it'll be valid, but there's still such an important part of talent selection that has to be human. Of everyone's different, everyone's worked at different companies, different academic backgrounds. Like, there's just something about a person reviewing something versus an AI just doing something. And
Yeah.
maybe I'll be someone will prove me entirely wrong, but it's been a long time that technology is supposed to just change recruiting on its head. It advances. There's a lot of things that happen that are good progress, but not replace. So,
I think it could definitely increase productivity,
mhm.
but I don't think should be focused on completely displacing.
Right.
AI can displace a lot of things, and we'll see what those things are
Yeah.
today. But I think in most cases, AI will increase productivity, and which will increase TAM. So I think a lot of people think like, oh, it's going to displace me as a designer or me as a salesperson, but no, it could potentially increase your productivity 10x, which then could potentially increase your TAM, which then increases your income and increases your opportunity. So I think there's going to be a lot of awesome things that AI can bring. But yeah, I think it's BDR. I said it in a LinkedIn post. It's like BDRs all day, every day,
That was awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Manisha, like, so on this entrepreneurial journey, now you worked with, tech companies, startups, prior, but now actually being a co-founder of a company, what's been some of the biggest lessons learned?
Oh gosh. I think think you got Mark kind of like touched on it earlier, right? It's not linear at all. And so you've got this, like, I don't know, just like the amount of time and focus that we've had just iterating and finding like just these little iterations until we find the right, what's the ICP, what's the proper product, like what's that fit, et cetera. I think I didn't know how much time would be spent in this like particular place. And it's like simultaneously very exciting and also very, very frustrating. I think that like you just want it to like,
Yeah, it's
you've
hard.
got something and you like want it to just be there, and that it's like there's a lot of, you guys have used the word grit a lot today. And I think that's like that's where I feel like you just have to muscle through it and like find it and just keep like chipping away. And really like we spend a lot of time with our customers and like really trying to understand like what is the feedback, what is working for them, what can we replicate. Like there's a lot of time spent there, and so that's a big lesson for me.
All right. I'm going to ask you like 3 apps you can't live without. It can't be WhatsApp. It can't be like Gmail, Calendar, or Slack, but 3 apps you can't live without.
Can I look at my phone?
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course, you can
I'll
cheat.
look at my phone too. I would say I I like to read and listen to things a lot. So I would say I don't know if it's like a popular app, Libby, which is like the library app.
Oh, nice.
It's like a, you can do audio or like like regular books. I'm a big library person, and then during COVID, I became a big Libby person because it's like the library app. Um, I use a podcast app called Overcast. It's just a regular, it's called Overcast, but I would say any podcast. I love podcasts. I've subscribed to yours now, so I really like podcasts. So I listen to them a lot.
Awesome.
And then because of stuff I do outside of work, I spend a lot of time on Instagram. So it's probably pretty vital for me.
Yeah, I think I really enjoy X.
Mm.
Um, I think there's just the content on there is so raw and real. So it's like literally my news app, and I'm a big Edmonton Oiler fan. I grew up in Canada in Edmonton, so I have my followers that I follow for all my tech information. And then I follow like local people in Edmonton, so I get the real pulse on the team there, so which I really love. And I just got a Whoop, so that band that you wear. It's
Yep.
been really insightful. This is as of late, so we'll see if it's my top one.
Mhm.
And I don't know, like I'm in LinkedIn a lot. I think that's also somewhere else where I kind of just keep up with people and see what everyone's doing. But I'm just thinking about the ones I open up the most.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the three for me.
All right, cool. What do you guys like to do for fun outside of work?
So I used to play ice hockey, and I think I need to get back into it this year. I took the last season off, but that and just family with wife and kids.
With the questions, what I like to do outside of work, I spend a lot of time in with animals. So I am a shelter volunteer in New York City at the New York City Public Shelter. So I spend a lot of time there on the weekend. And then we have, I mentioned earlier, Instagram is one of my top apps. It's because we started an Instagram account that got like 40,000 followers on now, where we market the dogs I work with large dogs. And so we market all the dogs that we meet for adoption. And then I co-run a rescue as well. So that's a lot of my time is spent
That's
doing
awesome.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's so cool that you do that.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, Manisha, thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through your background stories, obviously all the great work you're doing at Tildei, and all the great advice.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
us.